So these Gen 8 fossil Pokemon. I think when most people saw these Pokemon, two things went through their heads. Firstly, what were the designers smoking? And secondly, what the hell are these Frankensteinian monsters supposed to be? Or at least that was my reaction. Then I actually started looking into them a lot more, and then you realise like, oh, they're obviously mishmash of some fossils. And then it kind of led me down a rabbit hole of looking up dinosaur fossils, and I was reading like Wikipedia for like 6 hours. So I decided I may as well put that stuff to use and make a video, because I find these Pokemon really interesting. So from the start of the series, the fossils have been revived always in like museums or by big corporations, and that is way different to the Gen 8 fossils, which are brought back by literally just some random scientist called Careless, you know, like careless, and some weird portable fossil resurrecting machine that she has. And the end result is a fossil Pokemon which is completely different to any other in the series. If that isn't clear enough from just how they look, they are also genderless, unable to breed, and none of them are rock type, which every single other fossil in the series has been a rock type. And also something else you have to know about the fossil Pokemon is some of the entries suggest that they are not entirely the same as when they would have been alive and roaming around in prehistoric Pokemon times. For example, Mega Aerodactyl is said to be more like its original form, and the Pokédex entry for Tyrantrum says, and this is word for word, complete restoration is impossible. It always makes me wonder if one day we'll encounter something like a Kabutops which is not a rock type, so it'll be like the Kabutops that actually existed in ancient times. But anyway, that's a different topic. So anyway, let's go over how these Pokemon look. So the Dracovish and Dracozolt, you can clearly tell that this is like a cross section. It even has like the cartoony cross section graphic, you know, where it just looks like they've been completely cut in half and they're trying not to make it gory. That is clearly a tail, yet Dracovish has the end of the tail as like its big neck. And then just look at Arctozolt. This Pokemon is clearly suffering and needs to be put down. It is literally shivering and has a massively pained expression on its face. You know, if Pater was annoyed at the fact that we actually own these animals, imagine what they would say at this. You know what, I don't even think I need to go into much detail about how these Pokemon are clearly half and half of other ones. That, you know, you all know that. So anyway, let's have a look at the Pokédex entries. And yes, you should be taking notes on this. So firstly, Dracozolt. The sword one says it's unbeatable thanks to its lower body, but it has plant-based resources. That is something you should note down, because think about it, why would it need to be running around on these big muscular legs? And what is with the tail making electricity? That really seems like a stretch in its design. And actually that's going to come up later. But anyway, let's move on to Arctozolt. So again, he is shaking, so maybe the Zolt Pokemon did do some kind of kinetic movement to make electricity. But what's interesting here is that it says it has a hard time walking around. Maybe that has something to do with its feet being actually fins and not feet at all, you know? And that would be why it moves so slowly. But would it really make it extinct if Zolt was a plant-based eater? Because it wouldn't need to be chasing plants. So that doesn't make sense. Unless it has something to do with it not being able to outrun its predators. Note that down because that's going to come up as well. Then we move on to Dracovish, which is described as having powerful legs and jaws. So probably the Vish and Draco were the apex predators. But then of course you have this clear contradiction where it can't breathe on land, so how would it be running? I don't think that needs any further explanation. And then finally we have Arctovish, which at first glance looks like it could be the most likely to have actually existed. Then you realise its head's upside down. The skin on its face is apparently very tough, but that's most likely because that's actually where its skull is supposed to be. So clearly these Pokédex entries are probably bogus, they make almost no sense. Maybe they have shreds of truth in them from like the half of the Pokemon that each fossil is made up of. And maybe there's a link between Dracovish killing all its prey and going extinct, and also Arctozolt just being too slow. Maybe that has some kind of correlation, but it's more likely that it was just made up. So let's have a recap of the information so far. The Pokédex entries are most likely fake. They are mishmashed together of two different Pokemon fossils. And we'll move on to the next part, which is the origins, like the real world origins of these Pokemon. So I am nowhere near like a dinosaur expert. I know nothing about fossils. I was just reading Wikipedia pages. So maybe some of you know a lot more than I do about this, but I'm just gonna go into what I found out. The Arcto is based off an Ichthyosaurus. The Vish is a Dunkleosteus. The Draco is a Stegosaurus, and I couldn't pin down what the Zolt was supposed to be, but it's probably something from the Archaeopteryx genus. And I know that sounds very smart, but I literally just read it off Wikipedia. And there's a few interesting things to note about these particular fossils. Ichthyosaurus was first discovered in Britain, which is of course the Galar region. The Stegosaurus has a big history of having all its fossil bones like reconstructed and reordered. The Dunkleosteus was like a shark with a full skeleton, so it did have a very hard skull, and it was also a carnivore. And the Archaeopteryx genus is one of the most forged fossil groups. And the actual scientific name for a mishmash of fossil parts is a chimera. So actually, these Pokédex entries are listed as fossil Pokemon. They really should be chimera Pokemon, because that's what they are. And there's plenty of examples of fossil chimeras which were passed off as being real just so people could make money off of them. But they all got exposed, and I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty careless. But that also brings up kind of an interesting point, and that's that no one in Galar has actually exposed this big scam yet. Most people seem to believe that these fossil Pokemon are actually real. There's no one in the game saying that they aren't. And they haven't appeared in the anime yet, so maybe that will bring some answers, but I don't know, maybe they're saving it for Ultra Sword and Ultra Shield or something like that. I think it'd be really interesting to see how a forgery in the Pokédex will go down. I think it obviously doesn't stop these Pokemon from being Pokemon. I mean, man-made Pokemon are a thing, but I definitely see some changes coming to the Pokédex entries. Maybe the classification of them, because like I said, they should be called Chimera Pokemon. Or maybe they'll be called Scam Pokemon or something like that, I don't know. Science going too far in Pokemon has always been a thing as well. If you look back at Mewtwo and Genesect, even Ditto, as there's that popular theory that the Dittos are failed Mews. I don't know, I just see a lot of potential for some really interesting stuff in these fossil Pokemon. Though I kind of have a feeling Game Freak are just going to leave these Pokemon as they are and not do anything else with this story. And also, maybe I've just fell into a giant trap. Maybe Game Freak want you to think they're fake, and they've set all this stuff up that they are actually fake. Maybe they were real all along. Maybe we'll get some kind of proof or evidence that these Pokemon actually existed. Maybe evolution back in the day was a lot more rocky and natural selection was a lot more extreme or something like that. Maybe we get to see a legendary Pokemon that was in charge of how evolution worked. Or maybe these Pokemon were just meant to be a reference to fossil chimeras and that's where it ends. A lot of answers could come about from this little story thread, like maybe we could find out that some of the Pokédex entries are completely fake. I've seen a lot of things said about the Pokédex. Stuff like Magcargo's Pokédex entry would destroy the planet if it was true, you know, stuff like that. So they could link those entries being fake or exaggerated into these ones being completely fake and forgeries. Maybe go see who actually approves these Pokédex entries. I don't know, it could be a whole little interesting side quest. The biggest thing this reminded me of is that Pokefusion website. You know, the one where you can go and it'll mix like a Krabby with a Bulbasaur and it'll look very funny. But yeah, thanks for watching. This is kind of the first video I've done in this style where I talk about game lore, I guess it is. So maybe it turned out really bad. I had fun making this video. And I guess this counts as a theory, so, you know, leave a comment and tell me what you think of my theory. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see ya.